Hey guys, it's Derek. Today we're going to be talking about a 2008 Chevy Malibu. It's a no crank condition. I was working with a customer the other day and he had replaced the starter on the vehicle because it didn't crank over. The battery was good, the fuses were good, so he went and replaced the starter and it still didn't crank over. So I went and pulled a diagram of the starting circuit, and that's what you see here. So if you look close, so this is the diagram showing the starting circuit. If you look close right here, this is the starter motor. Basically, when he went and tested the starter for power, it didn't have any power at all. And you can see right here, this is the starter relay. PU stands for purple. So the purple wire that runs from the starter relay down to the starter had no power when he tried to start it. So basically this is a blueprint and it shows you how the starting circuit works. All right, here's the ignition switch. What happens is the ignition switch sends a signal over to the body control module on the vehicle. And then from there, the body control module, when it sees a crank request from the ignition switch, will send a signal over to the engine control module. This is the data circuit or the bus communication circuit. And from there, the engine control module will then ground the starter relay. From there, the contacts inside the relay close and it sends power down to the starter. So the question becomes, how do we diagnose this problem? And what's the easiest, quickest, most efficient way to figure out what's going on? Well, we know the starter wasn't the problem. The battery checks out good. By the way, here's the battery. The easiest way to do this, guys, is to plug into the data link connector using a compatible scan tool. And we need to make sure that the body control module and the engine control module are both communicating. They're powered up, they're awake, and there are no codes in either of the modules or computers. Most of the time when we see this problem, either the engine control module or the body control module is offline. It's just simply not powered up for one reason or another. So the very first thing, I honestly wouldn't even attempt to fix this problem or diagnose this problem without using a scan tool to make sure that both the engine control module and the body control module are communicating. So once we know that they're communicating, we can then get in there and we can check for codes, we can check the live data, and we can kind of go from there. So as you can see here, the engine control module is going to need to see that the transmission is in park or neutral for the engine to crank over. I believe you're going to have to look at some other parameters in both the engine control module and the body control module. In addition, if you can, the theft deterrent module as well. If the security system has been tripped, you might have codes in the theft deterrent system that you're going to want to check. I think this vehicle uses a separate theft deterrent module on here. Sometimes they go through the body control module, or sometimes they use a separate theft deterrent module as well. But basically, when you're hooked up to the data link connector with a compatible scan tool in the engine control module, you're basically going to be looking for a crank request. This signal, like I said, it comes from the body control module. So as long as the BCM is powered up and awake, the ignition switch is working like it should, it'll send a signal to the BCM, and then from there it'll send it over to the ECM. So under live data, you're looking for the crank request in the engine control module. In addition, once you can see live data, you're going to want to check the PNP switch input or the park neutral position switch input. Make sure that, again, like I said, it says it's in park or neutral for the engine to crank over. Another thing you can do too, guys, is you can actually go manually. You could go to the starter relay and you could check the inputs to the relay. All right, so for this relay to work, see there's pin 30 on the top and then pin 85. So you can see pin 30 gets power from the starter fuse, and it should have power all the time from the battery. Pin number 85 gets power from the engine control module. And actually, I apologize. I think before I said it actually gets grounded from the engine control module, and that was wrong. So here's the ground for the relay. The power supply does come from the engine control module, and when that happens, then it'll send power over to, it'll close the contacts in the relay and then send power down to the starter. But usually, like I said, when we get in there with a scan tool and we want to check for codes for communication, usually we'll find one or the other module isn't working. It just isn't powered up there's no communication. And then at that point, what you need to do is you need to figure out why that particular module is not communicating. So if the fuses are good, the module itself could be bad. Sometimes, on these vehicles, we'll see that the fuse block itself has gone bad, preventing either the engine control module from getting power or the body control module from getting power. And of course, it won't power up and it won't work. It won't communicate if that's the case. Another possible cause we see is either a sensor that gets shorting out one or the other modules. Like, for example, the throttle position sensor or the fuel tank pressure sensor will short out. The reference voltage coming from the ECM, and the ECM will be completely shorted out. It'll make it look like it's bad, but it's not bad. It's just shorted out. One really needs to check all the powers and all the grounds going into the particular module that is not communicating before it gets replaced, and that's very vital. A lot of people just, for example, if the engine control module is not communicating, they'll just be like, oh well, I'm going to go ahead and replace it, and that'll take care of the issue. And no, that's not the correct way to do it. You need to check the powers and the grounds going into any module before replacing it. So there you have it, guys. That's kind of a brief overview of the starting circuit. Again, this is for an '08 Chevy Malibu with a 3.5. What you're looking at here is the starting circuit. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the reply box below. If you want to know more about electrical or how to read a wiring diagram, feel free to follow me. Hit that like button, and I'll talk to you soon.